Ricki Herbert, welcome along to the Strive 365 podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. Thanks for having us on board. Great to see you again.
Yeah, you too. I feel like I've known you most of my life, mainly through television. But there's a couple of earlier stories which I just want to share. One of those in particular. Back when I was probably 16, trialing out for the New Zealand under 17. I think it was a development program at the time. A regional camp in Christchurch I was invited to, and yourself and Kenny Creswell were kind of leading the camp, and you didn't select me for the next stage of that program, so I'm not going to hold you to that too much. But what you did provide me with some really impactful feedback, which did kind of set myself off on my coaching playing journey a little bit, and that held me in good stead. So for that, I do thank you. A more recent kind of story, when I was at New Zealand Football with the under-20 women's national team, just before we headed off to the World Cup in France, I cold called or reached out to you, I think via LinkedIn initially, and said, hey, I'm not sure if you know who I am, but I'm with the New Zealand 20s. We're heading off to the World Cup. I'd love to pick your brains around some of your experiences, obviously linking directly to the World Cup in South Africa, and some things that maybe I can take away and apply in our preparation. And something you said to me, which blew me away, was I was probably one of the only couple of people that have actually reached out to you in that sort of 5 to 6 years since, and asked for insights. That surprised me. Like, why do you think that might have been?
Yeah, hard to know, really, Gareth. And I think, look, I strongly remember it as well. And I think it's, for me, it was an amazing time of my life. And I think, the experience of going through a real challenging qualification series and then getting the team over the line and heading off to, such a, privileged World Cup to be part of, and for the team to succeed and do so well. There's some pretty cool stories behind it. And I think off the back of that, to be fair, I was speaking at a number of sort of speaking engagements around business entities more than sporting entities, which was a really cool thing to do as well. And, something I always reflect back on. And some of those I've managed to have recorded and stuff, so I can, tune back and see what my thoughts were, some 14 odd years ago.
Do you remember some of the advice you gave me back then?
Now you're stretching my, challenging my thought patterns. But yeah, look, I think, probably the detail around the work too, Gareth. I think, the homework and what a World Cup. But I think also, taking the emotion out of it and absolutely going and enjoying the occasion. And I think as we all have that opportunity or the opportunity gets presented to us, is embracing that and really feeling the privileged side of, of leading a team from a coaching perspective, and having that opportunity to go to something which was the ultimate sort of outcome for what we're all striving for. And, it's a real high echelon to have as a target, and you manage to get there and enjoy that occasion as well.
Absolutely. I've dug out my notes, so I won't read all of them out, but I highlighted a few things that I think are really pertinent and people might be interested to hear. So a couple of things that you were trying to achieve. So how do we as a nation, or how do we change the nation to support football more in New Zealand, was kind of one of your key questions you wanted to solve. Be in the public, engage more and align with the media, be more accessible, play meaningful teams as part of the preparation. Don't worry about losing them. There's going to be learnings that we can apply to our key moments. Sequence of development that drove that group. So keep the challenges coming. So they had to keep rising to these challenges, keep that movement, that development moving forward. Tell the players that we're going to go into this match to win. Show them the areas that the opposition can be exploited. Give them the belief. Use video. And set the players some challenges. So as a centre-back, you might be marking the best striker in the world. Are you going to rise to that occasion? There's always an element of risk, but we're going to take that. So in order to manage that risk, get your ducks in a row, but be bold, and be brave. Good systems in place with good people and good roles. So when the adversity hits, I think you said maybe when the shit hits the fan, the chain isn't broken. Game one was the key to a tournament format. And last point here around Ryan Nelson didn't think he was any better than Leo Bertos, for example. His role was to lead the team and play like an English Premier League player, Leo Burtis, his role was to play as a winger at an A-League level player. So play to your level. Don't try and be people that you were not. So some really interesting advice there, which, can be applied to obviously football and other codes and walks of life and business. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time out of busy schedule back then to share some wisdom. And we went away to that World Cup as the big underdogs. I think we spoke a little bit about embracing the underdog, and maybe people don't necessarily see it as a good thing. So we embraced that a little bit, and went to World Cup and drew with France in France, which was a pretty incredible achievement for us at under 20s level. So yeah, some notes from way back that I think are really resonated today.
Yeah, no, that's cool, Gareth. And I think just quickly on that, I think the first one when you mentioned about one of the real outcomes for us, and we got asked this question a lot, about what do we want to succeed and be seen for. And I think the first point you brought up was about how can we actually change a nation, and have them reflect on football. And I think what happened in Wellington on that night against Bahrain, and then what continued to happen with the performance of the team over a World Cup campaign, I think really did resonate with the country. And I think that was a real key for us as staff, is we wanted to make the nation feel absolutely proud and follow the team. So, no, cool. Great to hear those little notes coming back, mate. Thank you.
So this podcast, the objective for me at least, is to try and connect people of all sports, but maybe using football as our context. So athletes who are striving to become high-performance athletes, high-performance professional athletes, whether it's senior national team, whether that's full-time professional players, who potentially aren't quite there yet. So how can we lean on guests like yourself to help those athletes learn some tips and tricks, some golden nuggets to hopefully apply to their world, which will hopefully get them closer to achieving those dreams? Other than athletes, parents of those athletes will be listening in. How do we as parents help our son and daughter achieve those goals? What are some things to maybe avoid doing? And then how those interact with the coaches who are working with these athletes, but also coaches who are on their own future high performance journey, wanting to work as an all whites coach, for example, or take an athlete to the Olympic Games. So you're in an incredible position where I could call you a triple threat. You've played at high performance, you've coached at high performance, and you've got a son working on that journey as well towards high performance. So I think you're uniquely positioned to give us some really great golden nuggets on all three of those aspects. So I want to start with you as a player, now an ex-player. I don't know if you're still kicking the ball around. I want us to go all the way back. So before you went overseas, you played in the New Zealand National League, very successful, 3 titles, 2 Chatham Cups. What is your observations, I guess, of the game back in New Zealand back then to where it is now? Have we moved forward as a nation? Has the game moved forward? Has it regressed? Are there elements that are, better serving our younger players today? And is there things that we can maybe learn from yesteryear that maybe we've forgotten that, we should be bringing to life more so?
Yeah, look, I think, some really good sort of thoughts and questions around that, Gareth. And, for me, going back into that era, I think, from a personal perspective, it was a very, very strong period. I think if I reflect back in my career, I was very young, I think 16 playing in the National League and then 18 playing in the national team. So the one thing that always resonates really strongly with me is the quality of players that I was able to play with. And again, the privilege of being able to play alongside a Dave Taylor, a Brian Turner, a Keith Nelson, some real household names across that era. And just the quality of that competition and the challenge that it had, where I think today's completely different. I think it's, we've kind of modified our competitions now where we've had to involve younger players into the programs. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think the growth and development of the players currently is going down a completely different journey. I think back in my era, hopefully it wasn't too far away, but it was a few years away. You actually had to, earn your stripes. You actually had to be good enough to be able to stay there and compete and retain a position and, challenge to be in a starting 11 week in, week out. So, the motivation, the mentality side, the resilience, the character building, those thoughts of content and wording were super strong coming through in my era. And it may have a different slant, may look a little bit different as we currently speak in the current competitions now.
You see that as progress or regression?
Look, I think it's probably just change in world football, to be fair. And I think it's really hard. I mean, you always get that added question, don't you? Comparing players of the past to players of the current future and what that's going to look like. And I think competitions are completely changed. And back then it was littered with super talented foreign players that had come out and transformed their lives and brought that to New Zealand, and families had moved, and they were super talented players. The league was littered with them, and there was strong competitive competition. Now, from a development perspective, it's probably more about engaging and providing opportunity for more younger players to be part of that scene. And I think, again, currently, as we know in New Zealand, Gareth, that landscape changed some sort of 14 years ago when the Phoenix got operational and we had professional football and sustainable professional football in New Zealand. And that changes the landscape as well. And that provides more opportunity for up-and-coming, promising young football players to, dip their toes, find a way, and hopefully find a pathway.
Yeah, so whilst it was littered with, quality players, potentially more quality than what we'd see kicking around today, you maybe needed to leave the shores of New Zealand to go and strive towards your next level, which led yourself to Australia, Sydney Olympic, and then after that on to England and the Wolverhampton Wanderers. Why the move to Sydney first, and then kind of how did that progression move on to the UK?
Yeah, I think during the World Cup campaign in the early 80s, a very good friend of mine unfortunately passed away. He was in the All White 82 team, Duncan Cole. He was playing at Canberra in the national competition, and he said, "Look, come and play for Canberra, and they want you to sign. There's a contract." So I went across and I stayed a week with Duncan, and I was all about to sign until my dad phoned me and said, "I've had a friend of Tommy Docherty's on the phone, who's living in New Zealand, and Tom would like you to sign for him at Sydney Olympic." So I kind of had to weigh things up, and I actually flew to Sydney, spent the weekend there, and then their chairman came out to New Zealand, and I actually signed for Tom at Sydney Olympic, played a season there. Tom was only there for the 1 year. He moved back to England, and he was very open to say, I'm hoping to get a gig back in England, Ricki, and if I do, I'm going to bring you out." And it was only 10 months later that the phone went again. It was a gentleman called Tom McNabb, who was very close with Tommy Docherty, and said, "Ricki, I'm at Wolves. I want you to come, and here's a contract." And in those days, Gareth, it was still the fax machines, and a fax come firing through to my parents' house, and I was super excited. And it just happened to be that the week after that, the national team was travelling to England on a 6-week tour, which I went on, and we're up in Newcastle. Tom and his assistant came up. I signed the contract, completed the tour with the national team, and a week later I was flying back to England.
What was the step up like? You're in England now, professional football fully. You had a bit of an intermediate step by Sydney for 10 months before that in New Zealand. Just talk us through the big changes, the big differences in either mentality in terms of requirements, physically, technically. What would be the things that these aspiring athletes we're talking to can expect when they make this jump, or try to make this jump?
Yeah, like I can certainly talk on the physiological side, because I arrived on a Tuesday and the weather wasn't kind. It was in November, and we were probably knee deep in snow. So the first training session I went to was in a gymnasium, which was right on the side of Molyneux. And so when I went, I'm meeting all the players, and it was a very, very rigorous training session. The side had been struggling, and so I went into the session thinking, I'd come out of a national team program, and I was, I'd have to say, and sort of growing up, I was kind of a super fit guy, and I kind of like to impress the coaches with the work rates, etc. But I went to this first training session. I can honestly tell you, when people talk about, have you actually seen stars when you've trained? I literally was seeing stars, and I think it really rattled home quickly to me to go, gee, I thought I was at a good level. I'd come through a World Cup campaign. I'd been training in a semi-professional environment in Australia, to a year later going to something that was a completely different level. And I think one of the best things that probably helped me was I actually had a good base to build on. And, 2 to 3 weeks later, I was fine. I was able to cope, but it was certainly a completely different level physically to be able to cope, let alone the challenges of the quality of players that I was, going to be playing with and against.
Yeah, so let's dig into some of those challenges. So physiologically was one, obviously, the base of every other player is at a higher standard. So some of these things we can't control. You can't necessarily control the environment that you come from in terms of your teammates and opposition. That's that talk about steps and layers up a pathway is always going to have that. But having a really good base, being as fit as you possibly can in your own environment, that's something that we all can control to give yourself the best ability to adapt in the shortest length of time once you make that jump. What other challenges do you see there could be? And is there anything we can learn and start to be proactive about doing before we actually have to solve those challenges in real time?
Yeah, look, I think the pressure side of things, Gareth, and when I say the pressure side of things, I'm talking about, being in football moments where you just don't have the same length of time. So your decision making, that mental awareness, that real resilience about being in those circumstances regularly in a game for 90 minutes. Whereas, if you're in New Zealand or Australia or, different parts of the world, that you're not comfortable, but you're able to deal with situations given the level of pressure or competition. But when I very first went, our opening game was against Brighton and Hove Albion. And, the pace of the game was electric, the quality of the players, the pressure you had when you're on the ball, the lack of time that you had to make decisions. So you're almost going through that checklist of my decision-making, my awareness, So I was able to start to pull out some content on needing to do things quicker, needing to react faster, needing to make better decisions. So I was able to get a little bit of a checklist, and slowly that became, I wouldn't say it became easier because the challenges kept coming, but it certainly helped me. And I think when you reflect back now, if we're not jumping to a different part of the podcast, but for kids now to actually learn and understand what that level looks like, and at times be exposed to that level, to then go back and then be able to recreate and understand from their own way of learning what those awarenesses might look like.
Yeah, and you really only get to understand that through experience yourself or asking others to help you, right? And that's where coaches and parents play a big part. So we'll put a pin on that for right now. We'll just sort of wrap up the playing career. So I can only assume the highlight of your career would have been the 82 World Cup in Spain. 3 appearances for the All Whites, over 60 total appearances. Would I be correct in thinking that, or is there other moments that hold higher priority in your mind?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to reflect back, Gareth. When you're a young kid growing up in South Auckland, I started playing the game when I was 4, so I loved the game. Back then, it was all about teams playing in England, watching the big match on the weekend. To ever think that you would, transfer that sort of love of the game and that passion of the game to be putting on a national team shirt, wearing it with pride and passion, and walking out against arguably, the best or one of the best Brazilian teams that they've ever produced at a World Cup was staggering in my mind. And I was 18 years of age when I first started, and 21 when I was at the World Cup with the national team. So those were like pipe dreams, and it was almost like that that story, that sort of fiction story of, here's a little 4-year-old kid living in Papua in South Auckland and has this really big dream about playing against Socrates in Brazil, and when you're 21 years of age. It was quite surreal, really, but absolutely the pinnacle.
I think it, for me, it resonates a little bit. Obviously, I never played for a national team, but getting a taste of playing, say, for the first team when you're a reserve team player, you go up, you get experience those teams, you see the Socrates of the of the world of that level, and then you drop back down to, say, the reserve team, and there must be some learnings either personally or about the game or about other things that you bring back to your current level, that you're better for that experience, you're more enriched through that experience, that you can now hopefully apply to yourself and your teammates around you. Did that kind of resonate a little bit when you went back to clubland or other lower international appearances, and how did that make you a better player?
Yeah, like I think you're spot on. I think I had a lead in. I had 3 months at Southampton before I went to the World Cup, and that was primarily to give me that exposure to being in a very, very strong professional environment. Back then, you had Alan Ball, Kevin Keegan, Mick Shannon, Ivan Golak. It was a very, very strong Southampton side, and I did have the privilege to sort of train alongside, and I played in the training game just once with them over that 3 months. And again, just to understand that completely different level, to then give me that stepping stone to go to a World Cup, and I guess understand it far more than what I would have understood just coming completely straight out of New Zealand. And then coming back to change from being at a World Cup and then coming back and then moving to Australia to play in a national league. And to be fair, then back, the Australian National League was very strong. I mean, it had, you're looking at an era of the game where probably 70, 80, 90% of the players playing in the Australian National League were part of the national team. So the competition back on those shores was still at a very, very good level. But that challenge of being abroad and then coming back certainly gave me the platform to understand it in a far more meaningful way.
The end of your playing career kind of happens as it does to all of us, and you choose to go down the coaching road. You could have done other things. You're an avid horse racer and a fascinator of that kind of industry. Why coaching?
Look, great question. And I think when I was young, Gareth, even when I was playing at Wolverhampton, and it was, super challenging at Wolverhampton. It was at a time where the best players were being sold and the team was struggling and they were dropping down divisions. But in my heart, it was something that I was super proud of. And something, like I say, a 4-year-old kid having a dream of playing professional football. I had, I think, 55 games or something across there. So for me, it was a journey that I wanted to explore, and I managed to do it. But even when I was there, I had a burning passion to be a coach. I don't know whether it was that my mindset had changed because I'd come from New Zealand or come out of Australia where, we might have trained 3 or 4 times a week, to now training every day and then coming in the morning and doing more and just seeing more happening, and who was delivering that work and how the coaches were working. And I think just really resembled with me. And I think it provided me with that spark. And it wasn't long after I moved back to New Zealand that I went into coaching and started, we'll talk about it soon, but, started at a lower level because it's something that I felt I wanted to do, because I wanted to understand the game more than perhaps jumping into something a little higher, which, being a national team player, I may have been able to do.
Yeah, you're probably alluding to the coaching bug, and anybody that's listening to this that's in a coach, I can feel it in my stomach now. I got into my coaching journey whilst I was still playing, but I enjoyed the thrill of seeing my teams score a goal more than my team that I played in score a goal. And once I kind of felt that shift inside me, I was like, no, I need to, respectfully move away from the playing side and put more of my energy into the coaching side, because that was my internal fire had shifted. So yeah, certainly the coaching bug. So you come back to New Zealand, start working with Central United. Yeah, very green as a coach, I assume. What are some, if you think back to that time now, some things that you look back and kind of shake your head at and go, I wish I had done that different. And maybe not wish I'd done it different because you need to experience these mistakes and these things to then come out the other side and be better. But what are some of the things that you think back and go, wouldn't do that again?
Yeah, I could probably take a step before Central United too, Gareth. So my first coaching gig was at a club called Papua in South Auckland, and I'd come back and I played the last part of my playing career. I played at Mount Wellington. A super friend of mine, Dave Taylor, he was taking over the coaching and said, "Hey, come and be my assistant." And I elected not to, and I took up this role at Papua, which was playing two divisions down, and I really wanted to go and understand what it was like to be coaching at those levels, and players who couldn't turn up because they were working or they had other commitments. And I wanted to put myself through that challenge to see what it was like. So I went off, started off at Papua, and one of the things I did early was I thought I'll be a player coach, and that was the worst thing I ever did, and it's something that I've shared and continued to share with my son as he's gone on his journey at the moment. But was I felt I was in the middle of the pitch all the time, and I was looking at players thinking, can you shift the ball quicker? Can you change direction? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm thinking, what am I doing this for? My performances are sinking as well, and you don't have that authority to be challenging everything in your part of the equation as well. So I did it for a couple of years, and I think more so that I probably hadn't got rid of the bug of playing that much. But then I made that decision, and I was at Papua for 3 years, and then I got a chance I actually went to Papua for a year, and they were playing in the National League. And then Kevin Fallon invited me to go to Central United, and that's really where the mainstream. The learning, though, Gareth, was strongly at Papua, very strongly. So I think doing my licenses, understanding the processes, going through the education pathway, I guess developing the communication skills and the interaction skills with the players. And at Papua and Papatoa, it was great because, players, Ricki, I can't make it. I'm a plumber, I'm an electrician, I'm working, so the conversations were probably more fluent than what would be naturally in a normal, professional environment. So it gave me I think a strong degree of, right, I'm now into Central, which was another level up. And I developed again under Kevin, and Kevin moved on. I had an opportunity to step up and take the first team, and that's really where things started to drive forward.
You then move into sort of the national team space, firstly with the under-17s and then under-23s. So think back on those times working with players, younger players, very motivated, talented for their peer group. What were your objectives, I guess, working as a national team youth team coach? Objectives firstly, and then maybe what are the key outcomes that you were trying to do? What was their approach? What were the key principles of coaching this group versus, say, a senior team at Central?
Yeah, so the 17s and 23s had a different context. So the 23s, I worked as an assistant with another gentleman called Ronnie Armstrong, and the national team coach oversaw the under-23 team. 17s was a little different. That got sort of put on my lap quickly, with a coach moving on. So then I think it was, for me, and I think a strong part of my career in coaching, certainly with the younger players, has been about providing them with that opportunity and that passion and dream of actually coming from this environment to a senior team environment, and hopefully them having the experience, privilege and opportunity of heading off to a senior World Cup as well. So look, I think a good thing about back then too, Gareth, was Australia was still part of Oceania. So the challenges through the age groups were super strong. Australia were very talented through those eras, and quite clearly continued on to do that. So yeah, process, development of players, game awareness, pathway opportunities, and just providing that sync of coaching process on what they would be going to move on to and experience as they move through the pathway from 17s to 20s to 23s, Olympic opportunities, and then potentially playing in the national senior team.
Is there maybe one thing that those successful players had in kind of common, or maybe one thing that players who didn't make that leap have in common that you can think of?
Look, I think strength and character. I think you probably at a younger age, you can have quite a contrast in what that can look like. And I think players that were brave in decisions, brave in making decisions, because that tentativeness comes when you're on that world stage, or you're through that qualifying, and certainly as a young player, I think you don't want to be the one making the mistake. And I think providing that culture and environment where we're actually encouraging players to make mistakes because they're going to be brave enough to make those decisions, and really the response coming off the back of what those mistakes or decisions were, and providing that support for them to understand those situations in more detail, because that detail was going to come in a far more stronger and bigger way as they progress through the age groups into, potentially being an all-white player.
I think it's a really key piece of information here for coaches to listen. So if you're suggesting that maybe the character piece is as strong a indicator of that transition than almost anything else. You could have said technical, you could have said physical, you could have said whatever else. You said character. So we bring it back and try and double down on this for coaches listening around. How do you develop that character piece? And also it kind of flows into athletes listening and parents trying to apply the development of this particular piece in their own worlds. But you spoke about environment and culture. I assume you have bosses that maybe set down certain KPIs that you kind of got to work within that framework. It kind of goes against winning, or maybe it doesn't go against winning, but maybe just speak a little bit more around, as a coach, ways that we can really help foster this character piece.
Yeah, I think you brought those ingredients together, Gareth, as well, because I think there are clearly parties that are going to play a part in it, and I think for us it was providing the challenge for the player. So to be brave in something. So technically, from a technical proficiency point of view, technical development and building in those areas is also super strong, and you want them to do it. But if they're not prepared to architect or try to engage in being brave and making a decision, and it could be a technical decision, it could be a challenge, it could be something, then you would find it hard, or you would identify the players that would be very conscious of that and would be very insular in maybe wanting to expose themselves to that challenge. And I think we were trying to, and the point you made about having information coming from the top, there was always types of players that national team head coaches were looking for. So helping to support that, but then aligning it with, parents play a massive part in this. When that program starts, these kids are 15 years of age. So there's an incredibly still strong connection with parents. And I think to have them aligned to saying, we actually want you as our child to be brave and make decisions. And we want you to be in those moments from a learning perspective, long-term, to make them. And I think sometimes they're more in a comfort zone where the kids have got to do super well, but they're not actually going to try and do anything that's going to challenge them. So we tried to get that mix right. And I think now it's probably more prevalent now that, even in the environments that I'm working in currently at the moment, we're very much instilling the challenge of the player, and putting them into those challenging positions, and then finding from them, from a mentality perspective and a conversation and communication with the player, is actually what are the positives you're finding from these challenges.
So let's bring in Ricki Herbert Football Academy now. Fill us in on maybe what it is and what you've been up to as a coach in over the last couple of years. And we spoke a little bit earlier around seeing what that level looks like and bringing that checklist almost to life in these environments. So Yeah, fill us in on the role you're playing today and developing the future All Whites.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a contrast basically across the whole of the North Island. So we may have some relationships with clubs, we might have some centres where we're running programs, or it might be a combination of both. And I think that lovely background you can see behind is actually a football club. And in the house that I'm currently living in with my wife, we look after, there's 10 young footballers that live in the house full time, and play at the football club behind it at Cambridge. So again, being able to take them through a full circle of, physiological challenges, the mental awareness and what those challenges are going to look like, the technical side of things, and the social side of things too. So, covering those four corners, which will be probably quite well known to people, potentially listening in on kind of how the four corners can work and integrate, and then aligning that across parents, because we are on a day-to-day basis, we're giving them those challenges and we're putting them into positions where we want to see them be brave. Because I am a strong believer that I think the characteristics of players, and I was super privileged to have in the 2010 team some absolute gems of players that had the strongest character that you can ever have. Just the most motivational, tough, brave, committed type players that continue to go on and do extremely well in their football careers. So I think it's building those pillars, Gareth, and the academy is really strong on that. So from player development to technical development to challenges to travelling. As you know, we've travelled a number of teams. We've got a number of more teams travelling this year to Australia, to individual opportunities. We're hugely grateful, and the young lady who you supported coming to Melbourne Victory to again have an experience. And that's probably a super example where young Natalie's going into an environment with young up-and-coming talented female players that you have at an A-League club, that she's coming back going, Ricki, it was just the most amazing experience I had. The level was here, the competition was here, their technique was here. So the true fundamentals and the reality of what we're teaching here hits home. So they're not ever at a ceiling where they feel, hey, we've actually made it. They're being dipped in and dipped out of different environments that those challenge points are continually coming for them.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And the daily training environment is one thing, but all these things that you can bolt on around that, the different sets of experience abroad and tournaments versus league play, playing up against older kids, for the girls playing against boys. It's I assuming the pastoral care that yourself and your wife are providing are a really critical element to that development as well. Like, these kids are away from home. Now, what does maybe speak briefly around that? Like, what are the other non-football related development tools and skills that you're trying to foster in these kids that are going to pay dividends in their sporting careers down the track?
Yeah, I mean, very, very holistic approach, Gareth. So, these are young men that are at school. So some are still intermediate school, some have gone to high school for the first year. So there's a real learning and education part to what they're doing in their day. And by being away from home, I mean, their rooms, the tidiness, the respect of the house, the personal growth and development that goes right across the board, that links into, their football journey and what they want to do and how they transfer that football passion and love, but they're transferring that into what's happening on a day-to-day basis, the respect within the house, the respect of the players, the respect to myself, my wife, and how that all flows across. Super holistic on the, I guess, the targets that we're setting for the players. And I think just one thing to highlight again is, from a technical perspective, I mean, we work very hard. They train every single morning, and we can develop the technical proficiency of the player. And when we move them to an environment where they can utilize that technique in a situation that is far more challenging, then the mind starts to come again. So it's that, whilst it's the constant challenge of yes, we want to get better technically with a full range of what those techniques may look like, but the environments are presenting the challenge of that technique. Then it's affecting mentally on how they're dealing with those challenges and taking those positive thoughts back. We've just linked up. They all have their own personal downloaded app where they store their own journal and they share their own ideas on an absolute day-to-day basis on what they're doing and how they're feeling. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, it covers a lot, and we've made some really good strides. We were operational on January 29th of 2023, so we're well into year 2, and super excited about what we're seeing and the growth of the players.
Yeah, you guys are doing some great work, and certainly experiencing some of the teams over here. The kids are great people as well. You just made me remember back to a story that another New Zealand coach, Declan Edge, once told me about football. He said he kind of likened it to golf. He said there's no point getting to the Masters, walking down the 18th green, and you need to hit a bump and run with a 7-iron under a tree over 200 meters to get it onto the green. And you go to your bag, and A, you don't have a 7-iron, and B, you've never practiced a bump and run. And in football, think about that context. What sort of skill or technique have I not developed by the time I get to the all white stage? But unlike in golf, football golf would be someone's trying to steal my ball before I hit it. In golf, it's just you and the element. So, yeah, trying to have all of these competencies and experiences under the pressure of the game throughout these developmental foundational years before we get to that high performance level is critical. And programs like yourself, coaches like yourself who have that foresight to understand that, is providing these players the best opportunity to successfully make that transition. I just want to take you back a little bit to the national coaching scene just before I get into the All Whites, which is an incredible story. I wanted to ask you around assistant coach. So you did an assistant coaching stint with the All Whites for a short time. Prior to that, you spoke about having some experience as an assistant. How did it fit with you? Did you feel that being an assistant wasn't what you wanted to do? Did it allow you to develop certain qualities that when you go back into the head coaching role, you were better for that experience? Because I'm acting as an assistant coach myself, but I harbour aspirations to be a head coach. I think the experience of spending time as an assistant is definitely going to pay dividends for me. Quite keen to get your take on it, though.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I would 100% agree. And I think that the one thing it allows you to do, Gareth, is grow and understand. And I think nowadays, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but there are a lot of coaches want to go straight to the top, or they're looking to have a senior role or a head coaching role. And then after a year, you wonder where they're coaching because they're not around anymore. And they've found, and for me, it was great to be in and around the players and running a lot of the sessions. And I guess from my perspective and being an assistant, no different than I'm talking about the younger players coming through now. I actually wanted to test myself and could I be brave enough to put on a session in front of national team players or under 23 players, and what would happen if I made a mistake, or what says I something went wrong, and how would I deal with it? So I guess I was happy to jump in, and I guess straight into the fire where you're happy to be exposed at that level and be challenged at that level. And look, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think there'll always be thoughts on who's a good coach and who's not a good coach, but I can only say that it super helped me to be, one, watching a national team coach work, two, to be in an environment where you could see players and how they were operating, and you're always building, I guess, in your mind, you were building, would I actually do this the same? Or is there different alternatives? Is there something? And I guess it gave me that 18 months, 2 years, 3 years of working in those environments to be shaping myself to go, oh, hang on now, I've now been appointed national team coach. I'm going to have to step up. I'm hopefully the ingredients that I've learned along the way now stand me in good stead.
How did you go about appointing your staff? So you're now the head coach. You need an assistant coach or coaches and goalkeeper coach. Did you have a big say in that? The national body lead on that? So now again, speaking more to coaches who are operating in that support capacity. What sort of characteristics and qualities were you searching for to come onto your staff?
Yeah. So when I went for the national team, you're talking about, Gareth?
Yep.
Yeah. So for 2010, I wanted to. So I got appointed in 2007, and it had been a difficult era for the national team anyway then, for various reasons. But which happens, it's not a one-off. It happened to us a few years later when we weren't successful through a campaign as well. And I wanted to bring some real, true culture value to the environment. So from a staffing point of view, I brought an assistant coach who I think had 104 caps for New Zealand. I brought on a Kiwi goalkeeping coach. From a medical staff perspective, we were super lucky because we had people that had kind of come through the 17s and 23s program that I'd been connected with and knew, and so I didn't have any difficulty in making those decisions. I brought on a manager who absolutely loved football, wasn't actively involved in the game, but was an incredibly high-level business person, which helped shape and plan what our 4 years would look like. So whilst he was there from a managerial point of view, and he's gone on to have some incredibly good connections with some of those top players from 2010, he was able to bring a strong business culture into our environment as well. So yeah, we had a lot of say in what we wanted. I'm not sure now how things operate and whether you're kind of handed on and past staff to work with that are coming through a system that may be the current model. But yeah, no, I think it's important because at the end of the day, those values on what you're trying to bring, the operation that you're trying to deliver, the culture, the mindset, all that needs to have some compassion to it. It needs to have some relationship across your group. And I was lucky. I had an extremely talented management group. And I think one of the key bits for me on that, Gareth, just to finalise, is actually they had the responsibility and the accountability to deliver in their respective regions. So, for me to give them that trust to go and deliver, because I had the strong belief that they had the quality to be able to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Beyond that, do you think it would be complementary skill sets, or providing characteristics that maybe were lacking in your makeup or personality or strengths? Like, is it something you wanted to fill the gaps or to strengthen areas of strength for you?
Yeah, I think absolutely both, because the best thing, one of the good things in that environment was there were opinions. And I think we made that really clear that we wanted to share that. And as the management group grew, as we got more successful and we were heading to South Africa, I actually brought on Raul Blanco, who was highly regarded in Australia. He'd coached the national team. He'd actually coached through a World Cup campaign with Terry Venables as his assistant. So he'd gone through an Asian qualification for Australia to get to a World Cup. And we were coming on to play Bahrain. So I brought Raul on board for a couple of reasons. One, his immense understanding of football at that level. But two, somebody I knew would be unbelievably good for me personally to understand. And there were many times when we'd close the door and he would tell you the truth. He would challenge you about the players that were in the team. And he would understand the circumstances because he had had that opportunity himself. He'd been through those experiences. So very much so, we were very open, Gareth. The group was very open to share their feelings and ideas and thoughts.
Before South Africa, 2010, you went in 29 to the Confederations Cup. You played Spain, who went on to win the World Cup the following year. You played the host nation. I want to tease out some of the learnings you took from that mini part of the campaign that you would apply 12 months later. Bringing Raul in, and bringing people in at different times along the journey would be one key learning I've just taken out of that. But what else did you learn about the group, about yourself, about your staff, that you would apply, you would tweak to get better results, or a different outcome ultimately, or closer to achieving your objectives in 12 months later?
Yeah, look, I think the one thing the Confederations Cup provided, well, one of the challenges we had for the Confederations Cup was there were a number of the main players didn't travel, that didn't go. So I guess it had a slightly different context to it, in the fact that it provided some players with an opportunity to put their foot forward or not. So the Confederations Cup, unfortunately for us, because of the timing of that window, didn't allow some of the main players, to be fair, to travel. So it probably didn't have the same context for me of, here's an opportunity, we're on the world stage, there's a really meaningful outcome for us. It was probably more, yes, there's a meaningful outcome and it's a great tournament and we're going to play some super high-level teams, but the games became more opportunity for players to present themselves on that stage, as opposed to, we're off to a World Cup, we've got all the best players, and now we're going to be accountable for our performances. So it had a little bit of a different context to it. And I think from a learning point of view, just the really cool things of what was it going to be like in South Africa? What were the training venues going to look like? What was the travel going to be like? With the food and the accommodation and the environments and all those sort of things that, there's a massive list that kind of sits underneath, hey, we're going to a football game tomorrow night, we're going to play Italy. So I guess it gave us all in our respective roles a great chance to have a rehearsal on going, here's some things that we kind of think are right, to going, look, we've probably got 50% of these things wrong and we can improve a lot, and we need to do that in the next 12 months before we go to the big dance.
Yeah, that rehearsal, or that recce, as we would say in Kiwi talk, is critical, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. So going away and playing some big teams, but experiencing South Africa and then knowing what that's going to be like when you go to the bigger tournament is key. Same as, we've spoken to a few people about going to the US. So going on an exploratory visit, seeing the school, getting the feel of, the East Coast is different to the West. So having that kind of opportunity to go and, smell and feel and taste these things before you go and, have to do it under real pressure is critical. You come back to New Zealand, and one of the objectives was to, bring football within the New Zealand a little bit more to the forefront through the media, through creating this story, through creating, lifelong memories. Well, I don't need to admit, I've told many people this many times, that my favorite ever sporting event, I don't know if this is ever going to get matched, is Bahrain at home in Wellington, to win the Intercontinental playoff to qualify for the World Cup. So yeah, unbelievable. So many mates, so many other people we just bump into were also at the game. You would have heard the story millions of times, the amount of pride that brings in. And it was just an incredible weekend in Wellington. What's your favorite memory, I guess, from not so much the game, or maybe it was the game, maybe it was Mark Paston's save, I turned around and kissed some random guy on the forehead behind me. It was just incredible. Like, what was, your favorite moments from that kind of event?
Yeah, probably quite a few takeaways actually, Gareth, coming out of that. And yeah, look, I think it's when you cast your sort of thoughts back 4 years, and we're planning, and we're sitting in a room and we're writing, what's Ricki, what's a really good outcome of this team? And we're kind of going, well, we think to change a nation. That was our slogan, to change a nation. It wasn't about going to the World Cup. It wasn't about competing in the World Cup. It was actually about changing a nation. And by default, going to the World Cup was going to support that. But yeah, look, that night was, I guess, look, I've been so lucky and so privileged to have played and managed at a World Cup and been in those environments. The one thing I haven't done, Gareth, is done what you've done and sat in a grandstand when there's been such a big match, something so big, at the end of the day. And trust me, we'll be going back to the World Cup in 2026, and I'll be traveling to America, Canada, and Mexico, because I want to be like a spectator sitting in a grandstand, like you were that night, experiencing how cool it is to see your national team play and do so well. And on that night, I guess the transformation of that last minute, I guess, and I've got some incredibly cool photos that sit around this academy that kids can kind of look at and see, of the whole bench is basically all standing up. I'm not sure what the referee and the fourth official was doing, but there's probably 20 people standing up in the coaching area, all sort of hovering over, waiting, looking. The emotion on those faces was just incredible, just incredible. And when the final whistle blew, for whatever reason, and this is kind of a personal thing because my dad's not alive now, but when that whistle blew, I turned to my right, and I don't know why I turned to my right. Maybe because I was coaching the Phoenix and that had some, don't know, maybe that was something I just did. And I turned to my right, and my father was standing on the side of the dugout, and he'd been called, I think, through FIFA to do some urine testing after one of the games, and he was there, and I can't in the life of me to think he was the first person I saw, and I've kind of kept that little video clip, so hugely proud of that moment, clearly, but look, I think just the quality of that team on the night, Gareth. I mean, I reflect and I go over that game and think, why didn't we win 3-1? We could have won that game 3-1. I think there were great opportunities, but to see a sea of white, to be a Kiwi kid born in South Auckland who loved the game when he was 4, to be sitting there, to have the privilege to be coaching just an incredible group of players, and to see that emotion. There were moments in the game, of course there was. Mark saves a penalty, Chris Killen hits the crossbar, Rory scores a goal, Shane Smelts puts one just past the post in the second half, Leo has a shot from long range. There were moments. There were just amazing moments. But for me, the context of what was happening in that stadium is something I look back now and go, wow, that's incredible. And it's just such a cool thing to hear somebody like yourself going, it's arguably the best, footballing moment you've had in your life. And for me, that's great. That has resonated deep into so many people's hearts across the country. That's the coolest thing.
Sure has. 3-1 might have been easier for you in the heart, but I think the fans, the one that will take that, and that was gold. I'll be amiss of me to gloss over too quickly, but I'm conscious of your time. But let's just briefly speak about the World Cup in South Africa. So undefeated. I talk about this to my non-Kiwi mates all the time. Like, we went to the World Cup and we didn't lose a game. No one else can say that. So yeah, well, for those who haven't seen that story unfold, go and check out Undefeated, the DVD and the book. But yeah, 1-1 with Slovakia, 1-1 with Italy, which at the time were the reigning World Cup champions, and 0-0 with Paraguay. So undefeated. I do have one question to ask you though. So Paraguay, 0-0. Remember watching this, thinking if we win this game, we go through. How much in your mind was keep it tight, go for it at the end, versus a draw, we'll take the draw and be undefeated? Like, did they ever come into your thinking?
Yeah, I think that the context of it too, Gareth, was a point would have been enough for us to go through if the other result was the other way around. So we'd have still got through, even drawing that game against Paraguay. And I think, and if I've probably had the question asked a million times, Ricki, would you have changed anything? And I think, it's a $1 million question, isn't it? It's if I asked every one of those people, I think we're going to go to the World Cup, and I don't think we're going to lose a game. I think those people would have thought, Ricki, do you honestly think that's going to happen? I think it would have been a different context of a conversation. And I think it was just how that team had evolved. I mean, strong, resilient. We come at the end, Winston gets a goal. Italy, Smeltsy gets us off the board after 7 minutes. Yeah, we've defended and we've blocked tackles, and Pasty's pulled off a few good saves. But then Woodsy turns trying to think, central defender, and narrowly puts one past the post in, I don't know, the 70th minute, which again could have changed the complex of everything. So I think we didn't have any let's play to get a draw. That was never the context of any of the games. I think it was more, and what's stayed with me from those experiences, Gareth, is it was more let's believe in ourselves. Let's give it the best opportunity we can on the world stage. We'd be doing analysis and showing the team analysis. And a lot of our conversation is, guys, let's actually be really good ourselves. If we're really good, is that going to matter? Or are we putting all our emphasis on, let's do an hour analysis on Italy because they're the current world champions, and forget what we're actually good about? And we had some great elements. The team was, I think, incredibly connected and understanding on how to play. And against Paraguay, we had a difficult 20 minutes, where, again, Pasty saving, Ryan's blocking things, we're defending well, we're getting limited opportunities. And I think when you look at the context of 270 minutes of football on the world stage against teams incredibly highly ranked more than us, way higher, including a World Cup champion, I kind of think the moments we shared in that World Cup were quite evident for the global people around the world to see.
Oh, absolutely. And as a growing fan, you put the All Whites back on the map and you see the cult heroes. So from me to you, on behalf of a lot of people that I know, congratulations and thank you for all those fantastic memories. I want to bring you back now maybe into the Phoenix. So you were doing two jobs at once. So without, giving too much of the dirty laundry, was that too much? Was it about right? There was obviously a lot of players that crossed over, so that was a real good synergy. But is it something that you would advocate coaches to avoid, trying to take on coaching more than one team at once? I know obviously a national team and a professional team, it's a context which is probably not applicable to the audience, but the idea of taking on multiple teams and multiple programs, like how does that resonate with sort of the coaches listening to this?
Yeah, look, I think in the early days at the Phoenix, I think a good thing for me, Gareth, I could be on the grass every day. And I probably struggle now to think, what does a national coach do when, apart from analyse games or watch players play, or I'm just thinking personally, I valued being able to wake up on a Monday morning after playing Adelaide away and go to training on the Tuesday, go to training on the Wednesday, go to training and constantly have my mind challenged every single day, every single minute, every single week. I think probably to go again for a second tier was something I probably should have considered differently from a national team perspective. But initially, I think it really, really helped me from a development perspective. And it's a little bit different now from a national team point of view. I guess, Darren gets lots of games now from a New Zealand point of view. They're primarily playing in all the windows. Probably looks a little different to, we struggled to get games and we didn't play a lot of games from a national team point of view. So it probably had a little bit more of a balance to it. And then I guess the expectation now. So, the expectation, we hadn't been to a World Cup for 28 years. So to come in and have that challenge for me was incredibly important. Now the challenge is to go every single time, given the format change, and it's not going to have the same challenge to it anymore. So I think that could look a little bit different for a national coach nowadays. But I can only give my gut feeling to say I loved it. It really helped me, and I was able to make decisions every single day that, potentially I would have maybe had my first year as national coach, we had one game in the first 12 months. And that was very non-challenging.
For the Phoenix, you were part of the reign of the end of the New Zealand Knights. So there's some learning to draw from the end of something. Then you started or part of the group that started the Phoenix. So now if you think about, let's say, Auckland FC, right, new A-League club, but trying to bring it to more relevant context. Maybe I'm going into a club for the first time, or two clubs have merged and it's a blank piece of paper. So, Auckland FC are going through this challenge now around, creating staff and structures and facilities and all that. What's your learnings or takeaways from the end of the Knights and the start of the Phoenix that, if you had a blank piece of paper now, what would you be, putting as the first cornerstones of your new building, so to speak?
Yeah, no. It was interesting. I think the back end of the Knights, that was kind of just completely different. That was just something that came out of the blue, and kind of happened. And I think leading that into the big difference now, Gareth, is if you look at Auckland FC coming into the league, they'll come into the league, they'll have facilities, they'll be ready, they'll have staff, they would assign their players, they'll have training venues, they'll have gymnasiums, they'll have a second team playing in the Northern Premier League in the Auckland Waikato Bay of Plenty region. Whereas when the Phoenix started, there wasn't any of those lists. There was nothing. There was one team. There was one team at that club for, I think, the first 7 years. So there was no pathway for players at the club. You could have 23 players on the roster, but every week 7 players weren't playing. There was nowhere for them to go and play. So the context is completely different now. So I look at the Phoenix now and go, state-of-the-art training venue, sports science to die for, 3 teams, academies. They have the full context, and that's evolved over time. And it's fantastic to see. I'm just saying back when I started, we didn't even have any training facilities to go to, and putting the team together in a short period of time. So I think with Auckland now, they've got a great lead in time. They've got preparation. They've appointed, I think, smartly with Steve Corica, somebody who's got global experience across that A-League. He's won competitions. He's been at a big club, and hugely supported with Terry McFlynn. I know Terry well. I think he'll do a super job in that Teddy role as well. So I guess now it's just what do you actually want to bring to that football club that's going to resonate with the public? Because if I look back at the two entities, if you're an Auckland fan going, well, the Kings didn't last too long and the Knights fell over, then what's going to make it that me as a fan in Auckland or New Plymouth or Christchurch or whoever's going to support, what's going to make me go along and support that team? So I guess the formation of the selection, I'm really curious to see which players will be signed, because I think you'll probably find that there'll be a strong context of some national team players coming back from overseas. And clearly there'll be an alignment of some Australian players, which we're kind of hearing when we watch A-League fixtures, and they're kind of sharing some names, whether that's right or wrong, but they're probably in the know a little bit more than we are. But you'll be formulating what their process looks like, so around your budgets, around your staffing, around your player personnel, around the quality of your training venues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there'll be a long checklist of things to do. And again, one of the good things, diverting a little bit, Gareth, but one of the cool things in my life is I actually got to start a football club with an owner. And I don't know how you get to do that around the world. For me, that was a super cool thing. It had massive challenges, and it took 2 and a bit years to kind of get a little bit of traction, but it was a super cool thing to do. So no doubt now, as things have continued to move forward in a far stronger way, that Auckland FC will be I think a very, very prominent entity in the A-League.
Just to kind of close off your coaching journey, you did have a few remaining stints after the Phoenix. You had Indian Super League 2014, Papua New Guinea head coach 2015, and the Maldives, place that my wife wants to go all the time, 2016. What did you learn from these worldly experiences, different parts of the globe, different cultures, different level of players? What did that teach you about yourself as a coach that you think is really good advice to the younger generation today?
Yeah, look, the India one's interesting, Gareth, because I think things that we've touched on previously. So primarily the reason I got the job is that we travelled to India with the Phoenix for a pre-season, and one of the clubs we played against, the owner of that club became a 10% shareholder of the club that I actually went to. And the Bollywood actor who was owning that club, the information he got was, why don't you employ Ricki? Because he's actually done this. He's been through a start-up with the club in Auckland, in Wellington. So that's how that kind of transpired. I guess for me, again, it was, look, I loved that experience in India. I think it was, I don't know why, but I've always fallen into, I set the Phoenix up at the start, and then I'm setting up Northeast United at the start. And things come better afterwards, don't they, I guess? But you're not always around long enough to enjoy all the quality side of things. But look, yeah, culture, player, communication, interaction, different levels, physiological. I mean, the challenges to actually bring a completely different group of players. So you had a lot of the local Indian boys playing. There was a draft system. So it was the first time I went to a draft system where, we're at this big event and you're, waiting to see which player is going to come to your club, So there was quite a variation on, you didn't have sole selection. So you were, inheriting players I say that in a positive way, players that you didn't know and you might not bring to your football club to work with. Domestically, working alongside local coaches and their sort of mentality and understanding and development and all that side of things. So quite a comprehensive look at it, quite a big picture look and feel. That was India, but super cool place to go.
Do you recommend coaches, try these things if the opportunity presents themselves, to not only get outside your comfort zone, but maybe outside of your local demographic, like, it's maybe on a smaller scale. So for me, Christchurch, the obvious move was to Auckland, and that's something that paid big dividends for me. But it was scary, and there's a lot in that sort of move. But is it something you would advocate coaches to do early, later? A lot of, as much as you can, like 3 different clubs in 3 different years. Is that a good thing, or one club for 3 years to really embed down some processes before you maybe look at the next challenge?
Yeah, excuse me. I'd be more inclined to look at a little bit longer term. So, I mean, if you're going to go to a club and you're going to have impact, then you need to have that impact over a reasonable period of time. Yeah, unless you're a coach that's being brought into an environment that needs to be changed quickly, and they feel that you have the characteristics to do that. So, it could be, don't know, let's say you're coaching in the Christchurch market, the team's 8th in the league, they're trying to avoid relegation, you may be brought in short term. But for me, and I'm supporting back in the coach education framework for New Zealand football around a number of the higher level licenses, it's interesting to hear some of the really up and coming talented young coaches and what their thoughts are, and what their philosophies look like. And they tend to have a lot of length to them. So I think it's a great sustainable thing. And you want to have an impact, Gareth. So you want to be able to go to Club A, and in 3 years' time for people to reflect and go, that was a really successful period for that coach. And then I would try things. I would sample something abroad, because I think it brings that different mindset. I think it brings that different challenge. And, I look back at my life and go, why didn't I make some changes at some times? Maybe I was there too long. And, when you have time, and clearly time's passed since I've been in some of those environments, that you might go, why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I decide to make a different decision? So yeah, I'd be looking at a 3-year span, because I think you need your processes, you need to get your philosophies in and embedded into what that's going to look like, and that may take a little bit of time. But I'd be reaching out for other opportunities, because I can only speak highly of the chances that I was given.
I want to move the conversation on to you as Ricki the dad now, which a lot of people, won't know of. So, you're one of your sons, or your son Kale. He is a coach in his own right. He's heading up Miramar, which is a big football club in New Zealand. He's had experience at Hamilton Wanderers in the National League, and he's worked as a technical director in the Ricki Herbert Academy as well. So, how did he get into coaching? What role did you play in that? We spoke a little bit before around his playing days, and you could see that kind of interest peak quite early in coaching. Like, what influence did you have as a sporting dad with a rich history as a player, but also a rich history as a coach? Did that have any impact on him, or did he find his own path?
Yeah, like I think as a youngster, sort of growing up, Gareth, he, probably through those early days, he played for Central United as a young boy. So sort of, I think 4 through to 8 or something, 9 or something like that. And I think he was always down at Kiwatia Street. He was always down at the ground because Dad was coaching. And, whether or not that sort of resonated and stayed with him, but he went into coaching very young. So he took on a role at Taupo. He moved with some mates, and they moved to Taupo, and he took up a position there coaching. And funnily enough, he started off as a player coach. And I was like, I've been down this pathway, mate. We've kind of shared these conversations, and it took time for him to kind of understand too that wasn't what he wanted to be. But he continued on, and I think because he was in coaching so young, I think I'm really proud. One of the strengths he had was the ability to create a real good connection with older players, and to provide that environment that the players were very connected and wanted to play. Post Taupo, he moved to support me as assistant coach at Hamilton. And then when my dad passed away, I stepped away from football for quite a few months. That was a hard one to take. And Kale stepped up. And I remember when I signed at Hamilton and said, look, I'm going to bring my son. It's Kale. I think he can't remember what he was then, 22 or 23 or whatever. And I could see people around the board table going, Kale, they didn't know him. They didn't know Ricki's bringing his son. I could kind of feel that sort of context of it. But I knew in my heart the quality that he had. So when I stepped down, Kale stepped up, and he picked up the reins with the senior team, did extremely well when they were in National League. And as you say, currently on another 2-year contract with Miramar in the senior competition in the Wellington region. So he had a burning passion. He had like I thought I was, maybe 27, 28 when it started with me, but with him it was probably 22, 23 when he was super keen to be involved in the coaching ranks.
Yes, that burning passion for coaching. You're going to have parents listening to this who have kids, sons and daughters, have a burning passion for the athletic career side of it, which may or may not eventuate into a professional career or international career. It may go down the coaching road, it may go into referee, may go into completely something that's not sport related. So I guess if you're speaking directly to those parents of these pre-high performance athletes, what is the key nuggets of advice that you would give with your dad hat on now, not coach or athlete hat, dad to dad or dad to mum or dad to support network? What do you see through your years of experience is going to be the critical pieces here to really help foster that successful transition?
Look, I think, and I don't say it in the context of being simple, but it's that real sort of framework of support, that real benchmark of being super positive. And I listened, you may have seen it yourself too, Gareth, but I listened to what I thought was a really cool podcast or interview with Robin Van Persie. He's talking about his 13-year-old son who, hopped in the back of the car one day and said, Dad, I don't get enough time. I'm not on the field enough. And he kind of reflected on that and went, to be fair, whether you're a good footballer or whether you're not a good footballer, I'm going to love you the same. That was his first context. But the second one was, and I really love it, talking about a loser or a winner. And the loser is the one who shares the ideas of, I'm not getting enough time. I don't think the coach is any good. I'm a better player than Ricki. I should be getting more game time. Where the winner is, where you haven't had the game time on the weekend, when you train on the Tuesday night, when you're back, you're the best trainer. And providing that mentality, and I think we talk to a lot of our parent coaches around our clubs about them being the biggest asset when a kid hops in the car leaving a football game, with the simplicity being a conversation of, oh, you didn't play very well today, I don't think you're that good, to thought the game was good today, some really, really positive aspects of your game. Shall we share some ideas and have a conversation about it? And I think parents can really shape what those processes look like. And it's not providing a insecure framework for the kids where everything's about, my son's absolutely the best, he's the best, he's the best. But it's providing the reality concept and conversation about the journey that their child is going on, and being able to share that freely and equally and really transparently with those children. And we work hard. We work hard with the parents that are in the house that have, high level expectations of the players. And so I think combining those thoughts and bringing those parents really close on what the journey is going to look like.
Yeah, there's some pretty good research around the car ride home post game or post is the least favorite time, the most stressful time for the athlete, because they jump in the car and they expect they're going to get more grilled than praised or whatever. So yeah, in that moment, the athlete needs a parent, not a second coach. And there's some really important time to tease out some learnings and some experiences, but it's about the kids' learning experiences, not your observations. Thinking as a parent at that point in time. Do you see any kind of detrimental behaviours that sporting parents bring that maybe they're not aware of? Firstly, if they become more aware of it, they might now temper some of those behaviours. But even if they're aware of it and don't care, maybe there's a lack of understanding behind why that's detrimental. But what do you see across your times now, working with these players as well as the sidelines and local games, plus your past experiences?
Yeah, look, I think I just think that volatile comment, you know what I mean? I think it's that over enthusiastic, over passionate, non-realistic parent comment that comes and is seen in a negative way. And again, you would have seen this photograph where you have Cristiano Ronaldo sitting in a deck chair on the side of a football pitch while his kid's on the field playing, and just kind of resignating that you can have a world-class player, arguably one of the best in the world, sitting in a deck chair, relaxing, watching and enjoying a football game where his son's playing, to, the numerous things that we see from time to time of, over exuberant sort of parents and over opinionated and quite stressful. And I mean, you see that, I wouldn't say regularly, Gareth, because I think programs and I think education and I think things like this and sharing and providing parents with that more framework and understanding and development that it's a journey and they need to be part of that and sharing that and having the positive concepts to it. It's like the car ride you talk about. I mean, how difficult it is for a kid to, or how difficult is it not to happen for a kid to hop in the car and a parent to say, name me the 3 positive things that you did today. And the conversation starts off completely different. And I think terminology, language, open-ended questions, positive mindset and, sort of open-minded thinking towards that performance.
Yeah, some great advice and some good tips there for the parents. Right, I've taken up a lot of your time. I really appreciate everything so far. There's been a lot come out of this. I want to finish with our rapid fire questions. So For the audience, can you pose a question for the week?
Yeah, that's a good one. I saw that one come through on the list, so I had to think about that. Question for the week. If probably the question would be, if you had an opportunity to reflect and provide one only question to your child at the end of a football match, what would it be?
That's powerful. It can also be as a coach, right? And also as an athlete, what's one question I'm going to ask myself upon reflection? Provide me a concept or an idea that you've been thinking about.
Concept or an idea. Provision of, I guess from an idea point of view, Gareth, is challenging the player pathway and from a development point of view, and where that pathway is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So just expanding on that is, what's the game going to be like in 15 years' time?
Yeah.
So can we dig deep? Yep. Has the game changed over the past 10 years? Yes, it has. Does that mean it's actually going to change in the next 20 years? I think yes.
Brilliant. Provide me a recommendation for a book, movie, podcast, TV series.
Okay. I've got a book and a movie for you.
Go for it.
I've got, the book is Relentless by Tim Grover.
Yep.
And my movie, oldie but a goodie, Chariots of Fire.
Nice. Relentless. I actually read that last year. Incredible book.
Yep.
Tim Grover, trainer of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Yeah, excellent read. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about any system, doesn't have to be football related, but one system that you're involved with, what would that be?
Providing more accessible, managed and controlled training time for players.
I won't open that can of worms because that's a great one. Share with me one piece of advice that you were given.
In simplicity, really, Gareth, like train hard, remain focused, and stay positive would be, yeah. Don't be afraid to be challenged.
Yeah, nice and simple. What is the one thing you are striving for today?
Look, I'd love to see an increase in quality of players from New Zealand playing in much higher level competitions around the world.
Nice. And to finish it off, provide us with a quote for the week.
I've stolen this one, but I've actually, sorry, I'm going to read it. I did put it down. So, your self-worth is determined by your attitude. Sorry, your self-worth is determined by you. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference.
Brilliant. Hey, Ricki, this has been incredible. So many insights, stories, memories, reflections, little pieces of information that anybody listening carefully can take out and test in their own world, with the aim to help you move to your next level. That's my personal driver for these sort of conversations, of sharing the wisdom of people like yourself to help people move forward in their journey. So a massive thanks for me. Keep up the good work with Ricki Herbert Academy. Looking forward to seeing some future All Whites come out of your stable sometime soon.
No, pleasure. Thanks so much for having us on board, Gareth. Thoroughly enjoyed it and great to see you again.
This episode is brought to you by Platform Sports Management. If you are interested in the US college pathway, the team at Platform Sports are who you need to be connected with. They will guide you in every step of the process and maintain the connection to students even once they've settled in the US. They even have a no offer, no cost policy, so you have literally nothing to lose. Use the link in the show notes to start your free consultation today. Thanks so much for sticking through to the end of this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could hit the like or share button so we can get these amazing insights out to other like-minded coaches, athletes, and parents. Cheers.